All right, guys, welcome back into the One Winning Pod Ravens History Corner. We took last week off. The bye week for the Ravens meant the bye week for the History Corner as well. And we're going to dive right back into it. It's great Ravens history stats and memories for you. And this week, we're coming off a bye week for the Ravens. We're going to look at the top 5 most memorable games coming off the bye week for the Ravens in Ravens history. Will this game against the Carolina Panthers be a game that makes it in this list after this Sunday's game? Likely not, considering you look at what the Panthers' record is this season, what this matchup would mean to the Ravens from the standings perspective, from record standpoint. If they win, obviously we want the Ravens to win to build off the momentum that they've had these past couple of weeks going into the bye. But honestly, it's something that the game itself will have to be much more exciting, much more back and forth than we're expecting for it to make this list compared to what we got here, because we got some good games on this list. And to start off with the games at number 5 on this list, I'm looking at the 2000 season. Now, this wasn't really a memorable game in and of itself for the Ravens, but definitely memorable for what it signified. With a win in this game, the Ravens would clinch the playoffs for the first time as a franchise. It's going to be the first time since 1977 Baltimore would be watching a playoff football team. And honestly, going into the game, really the only time in Baltimore sports history that fans ever attended a game expecting to see a franchise history with any more certainty than this game was likely Cal Ripken's 21-31 game. I mean, obviously, you knew it was going to happen. He just had to go in and play and make it till the game was official, and he broke the record. And here, well, obviously anything can happen in a matchup. The Ravens couldn't have had an easier matchup than they had in this game. The Chargers came into this game with a record of just 1-12. Their sole win on the year being a home game victory against the Kansas City Chiefs, where they won by a single point on a late fourth quarter field goal. This team was one of the absolute worst in NFL history. They had a virtually 0% chance of upsetting the Ravens, especially with the game being in Baltimore, 1 o'clock start time for a West Coast team. And, the game itself was basically just, for the Ravens, a celebration of everything that the Ravens had done well that season. On offense, you had Trent Dilfer throwing a pair of touchdown passes to Kadre Ishmael and Brandon Stokely, respectively. Jamal Lewis would get in on the scoring action with a leaping 1-yard touchdown. And the defense was their usual dominant self. The infamous Ryan Leaf was under center for the Chargers, and that's probably all you need to know to guess how the game went for the defense. The Chargers could only muster a meager 128 yards of total offense, and the Ravens' defense collected a pick and a pair of sacks en route to an easy 24-3 win. And it was the first NFL playoff appearance for a Baltimore football team since 1977, as we said earlier. So, in a vacuum, that game, not terribly memorable, but for what it signified, I think it definitely deserves a spot on this list. And number 4 on this list, we're going to look at 2009. The Ravens would exit into their bye week looking to shake the bad taste of a 3-game losing streak that soured their 3-0 start to that season. And really the fact that all 3 of those losses had been by only 1 score, the final one thanks to a missed field goal of all things, really made the desire to bounce back from that much stronger for this team. But there was still question on how easy that would be. The Ravens' opponent coming out of the bye would be the Denver Broncos, who unexpectedly really had gotten off to a 6-0 start to their season. And the Broncos would be traveling to Baltimore coming off their own bye with basically the exact opposite momentum that the Ravens were. They were riding a 3-game winning streak that saw them defeat the Cowboys, Patriots, and Chargers, all strong teams that would end up making the postseason by the year's end. And despite this momentum, though, at the game's end, you would have thought it was the Ravens who were coming off that win streak, as the Ravens would come out with a big win. Now, it did take the Ravens a little bit of time to get going in this game. The Ravens held only a 6-0 lead going into halftime, but the momentum would swing firmly in the Ravens' direction in the second half, beginning with the kickoff, which then rookie Ladarius Webb would return for a touchdown. After that, the Broncos would answer with a touchdown of their own, but the Ravens would finish the game with 3 scoring drives on offense and would leave with a commanding 30-7 victory. Great victory that would be a great catalyst for the rest of their season. And number 3 on this list, let's look at 2006. Now, in 2006, the Ravens, their season started out with a hot 4-0 record, but then they dropped their last 2 games going into the bye week. And after the bye, things didn't get very easy. They traveled out to New Orleans. It's just a team that was also off to a hot start. They had a 5-1 start after signing, in large part that hot start was due to their signing of Drew Brees in the offseason. And their sole loss to that point was a 3-point road loss to an equally hot starting Carolina Panthers team. And going into this game, you had the added drama of an offensive coordinator switch. Despite the Ravens' hot start to the season that year, their passing game had lagged behind what was expected going into the season with the signing of veteran quarterback Steve McNair. And so Brian Billick, after the final loss before the bye, he had to make the difficult decision to fire his close friend and Super Bowl 35 opponent Jim Fossil and appointed himself offensive play caller for the rest of the season. This was a gamble by Billick, but one that paid off in this game. The Ravens got off to a quick 21-0 lead on the Saints off of 2 Steve McNair touchdowns and an interception return for a touchdown. And the Saints would really be unable to recover. Going into the fourth quarter, the Ravens had a commanding 35-7 lead, and while the Saints would mount a mini comeback, it was much too little too late, and the Ravens would easily defeat the Saints 35-22 in this game. At number 2 on this list, let's go to 2018. We talked about this game last week, Lamar Jackson's first start as an NFL quarterback. Going back to this game to discuss the context that the Ravens were looking at before this game kicked off, the Ravens' hot start to that season on the offensive side of the ball, it had stalled going into the bye. The Ravens had stumbled into the bye on a 3-game losing streak, which included an uninspiring performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers right before the bye week. And a couple days after that game, it came out that Joe Flacco was going through a hip injury. His status for the Cincinnati Bengals game was up in the air after the bye. So that meant, in all likelihood, Ravens fans would get their first look at Lamar Jackson as a regular season starter. He was a rookie that year, but going into the game, there were questions as to whether or not Lamar would be able to suit up himself. He suffered a stomach bug that required a brief hospitalization on the Thursday before the game, but was ready to go on game day. And there he delivered a memorable performance. Lamar ran for 119 yards and threw for 150 more en route to a close 24-21 victory over the Bengals, which, even though that stat line, the rushing obviously is a huge total for a quarterback, passing pretty meager, but if you watch the game and compared it to what you saw in the preseason, Lamar definitely looked improved from what we saw then, and it was really good sign for the Ravens and a strong enough performance that Lamar would hold on to the starting job for the rest of the season and beyond, as we all know. So a great game there, great win for the Ravens, and very memorable in the fact of what it meant for this franchise going forward. And for number 1 on this list, how can they not put the Sunday night game against the Patriots in 2019? This game is so recent and had such an impact on what the Ravens are today. I don't think I have to go over it in too much detail here. But just again, to give a refresher on the context for this game, we can all remember where the Ravens were going into the bye this year. Their 59-10 wins in Week 1 against the Dolphins had led to a 4-2 stretch where the Ravens looked good but far from dominant. Definitely, there were some questions about this team had to answer. But then right before the bye, the Ravens traveled to Seattle, and they had a commanding statement win over the Seahawks. You had the 4th and go for it, as we affectionately call it, where the Ravens would get that touchdown, and then Marcus Peters' interception for a touchdown in his first game as the Ravens. So, the question was, this was a commanding win, but could the Ravens maintain the momentum from that game coming out of the bye against the 8-0 Patriots in prime time? And, well, the answer was a resounding yes. As we all know, the Ravens won the game 37-20 in a contest that was never in doubt, and it provided the first step in finishing out their 2019 regular season to a franchise record 14 wins. And there you have it. That's my list for the top 5 most memorable Ravens games coming off a bye. To recap, number 5 on this list, 2000 against the Chargers. Number 4, 2009 against the Broncos. Number 3, 2006 against the Saints. Number 2, 2018 against the Bengals. And number 1, 2019 against the New England Patriots. So there you have it. And like I said, I don't expect that this game coming out is going to make this list, but you never know. Anything can happen in the NFL, and we're just going to have to see. Hopefully it's an easy win for the Ravens, and they can have a hot start to finish out their season and hopefully make the playoffs. And remember, if you like this content, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel and the podcast for great Ravens content all season long.